What we have is a slideshow presentation, and it's got several topics that matches the agenda that you should see before you. And anybody speak up, please, if something doesn't look like what I'm speaking to. We want to do some quick introductions, and I'll be even quicker now. Look at last year and what we talked about. Talk quickly about what it is that the State and Affiliates Committee does. And that's specified primarily by two things: the DASI, which is the Delegate Advance. What does DASI stand for?
Delegate Actions of Continuing Interest.
Of continuing interest. Thank you. We always just say DASI, and if I don't say it enough times, I forget. Then we'll review maybe some work we've done in the last year, quickly talking about some of our recommendations for the delegates meeting that's coming up. You have something in your advanced delegates motion, and Caleb's going to take the lead on that, as he was our lead author from the committee on that document. Briefly mention some of the cases that we've reviewed. I don't think we're still waiting for any other ADMs or other potential motions that may be coming up at the delegates meeting. We haven't seen a whole lot other than this state chapter challenge that would affect us. But if there's anything that you are concerned about as a state or affiliate, please, that's the time to bring that up and see if we can either prepare a response or let you know what we've already talked about. And then we've got a couple updates on some work groups that we have. We have one for training for state affiliates, and then we have some work, and we'll seek feedback on for Tournament Clearinghouse. I know that that's quite a hot topic. Then we'll leave it open for any questions and answers and wrap-ups, make sure that we've got our action items specified. And so that's our agenda. Before I go forward and start going through the slides, I want you to know that we are recording the meeting so that we can take accurate minutes. And if anybody has concern with that, please speak up or put something in the chat. Steve Mofford is taking minutes, and so he will be using the recording and an AI tool to help him prepare those meetings, and then we'll post those minutes to everybody when we have the once we get those all done and approved by the committee. All right, so I'm only seeing the presentation that I'm doing here, and I don't see everybody else's faces. So Steve or Mike or anyone else who wants to chime in, if I'm missing a hand raised or anything like that, please speak up and kind of stop me. Again, I'm not as familiar running Zoom meetings with just one screen versus two, so I don't want everybody to see that small presentation that first popped up. Anything before I move forward? Okay, let's go to the next. Quickly review. So SAC, these are on the left side are our current members, USCF members who are appointed to the committee. This is a committee that's appointed by the executive board. It's not a delegate elected committee as some others are, or appointed committee as some others are. I am the chair. Fun Fong is our vice chair. And then we have several some are newer to the committee. Others have been on this committee and provided good service to US Chess for some time, and we appreciate everybody's contributions. We have two appointed liaisons, or identified liaisons. Vish was our primary liaison. He was the committee chair prior to me, and then once he was elected to the executive board, I replaced that vacant position. Randy Bauer still listed, of course. Randy is going off the executive board here at the end of the month, and will be replaced by the executive board. We have some liaisons, and Jacques is on the line now too. Was recently identified by Renee Bartlett as a primary liaison with U.S. Chess. And then Rose McCann is our U.S. Chess staff person. She's the governance coordinator. She's the person who sent out information, for example, on our meeting agenda. And then Brian Tillis is former member when he was not a U.S. Chess staff person, and then when he moved over, he remained a liaison, and he's our marketing communications manager for U.S. Chess. So there are a few policy documents that govern the States and Affiliates Committee, and it's in accordance with Executive Board Motion 1825. They established certain SAC committee and certain directives to advise the Executive Board on matters related to U.S. state chapters and to all affiliates. And when necessary, which happens to be more often than would be preferred, but nevertheless a duty of ours, is to review claims or appeals submitted to U.S. Chess involving any allegations against a state chapter or a local affiliate. And then we make recommendations back to the executive board on any way that we think might resolve the matter. We're also chartered to collaborate with bylaws, and that'll come up here later in the meeting as we talk about state chapter challenges, for example. And then we also lead the development of educational materials to affiliates. Now, this latter bullet is something that we really tried to emphasize more of in our duties here this year. In the past, we've been focused primarily on trying to catch up and get current with all of the appeals that have been submitted. And in fact, we have quite a few appeals now, but we also have, through the good work of the committee members, taken on 2 initiatives based on a survey that we did and feedback from the last workshop that we did in 2024. And we'll give you more information on that as we go forward. So during 2024, these are a lot, and I'm by no means saying that SAC got to any all of these. We picked 2 or maybe combined a couple into one of our work groups, but there was requests, and we have things that we haven't done but are working on. A mentor-mentee program, maybe from some of our larger, more established state affiliates to some of the smaller states, smaller groups that are operating under more informal practices and not the formal policies and procedures that may be of benefit to them. Prepare new affiliate training, which is again something that we are working on, and we'll bring that out. There was some discussion about developing a model bylaws, certain minimum requirements for state chapters that are more explicit than what the DASI states, which I'll review here shortly. Then starting to talk about performance indicators, performance requirements for states and being able to measure those. Improve the communication method of registering delegates. I think we've been working on that. And educate states on selection and alternates for delegates. We have not resurrected the new delegate training that Mike Hoffbauer referenced last year, but that will be something that we'll move into in 2026. And then some leadership training has been suggested as well, perhaps coinciding with TD training. I bring this up not to rehash all of these items, but to let you know that we have talked about these in the past year, and we're working on them within our capacity to be able to do so. That doesn't mean one is more important than the other. It's just we took the input from everybody that we received, whether through a survey or through the workshop feedback, to try to prioritize these things. but it is our intent to try to work on these and tick them off as we can as we move forward through the calendar year. So what is the DASI? This is kind of what our SAC does in terms of trying to review and ensure that these requirements and recommendations are being implemented by the state chapter affiliates. The four requirements seem pretty straightforward. The affiliate dues, the certification of their state chapter delegates, and holding an annual rated chess tournament championship. And that's like an open championship for the entire state. That we're not talking about the invitationals and the championship selections for senior, high school, junior high, elementary, K1, things like that. What we're talking about is the overall state championship. A lot of states hold an open championship. Some states have qualifying and have a closed championship. Those are the two ways that we most see states meeting that requirement. But the big one is really having a formal organization structures laid out in bylaws. And these bylaws can be quite extensive in some cases. In some cases, they may be out of date. In some cases, they may be new and current. But this is really what lays out the governing authority. State chapters are really self-governed within the boundaries that USS specifies in say this documentation, in this document, this DASI, but really have quite a wide variety in how they define their authority and select their governance, governing people who are governing their organization. We look for things like, what's your state chapter purpose? Are you trying to develop outreach to other organizations or bring in new members, support certain groups of chess players within your community, things of that nature. But ultimately, we're looking to make sure that all members are of USCF are given opportunities to participate in the state governance and their activities. So we're not contrary would be a state chapter that is just a small business and has no way to elect any members to their board. And then there are a long list of recommendations, and this has actually been updated over the years. These are not enforceable, if I can use that word, by SAC, but they are recommendations that we try to help promote and educate other states and local affiliates if the case is necessary to help promote chess and act in the best interests of our members. Of course, the newest recommendation out of this is the designation of a coordinator to promote events for women and girls within their state. Any questions from the participants on this call about this delegates action of continuing interest? It's dated 1991, but it's been updated many times over the years. And this is available on the US Chess website, where you can see the dates of all of the amendments to this. Okay, we'll move to the next slide. So this is what our main activities over the last year were. We worked on a naming policy, which we were directed by the 2024 delegates meeting, and we'll go into that. And Caleb will give a specific discussion on what we have prepared and ask for your feedback.
Just to clarify, it's not the naming policy that I'm going to talk about. It's the response to the delegate motion. The naming policy it was about the executive board.
Okay, Thank you. Yeah, that probably was worded poorly on my part. But yeah, the delegates motion. Oh, is the third bullet. I'm mixing up. Earlier, last year, we presented a naming policy, like if the, in my case, the Iowa State Chess Association, if someone else wanted to call themselves the Iowa Chess Association, there was a policy that was written to define what's acceptable and what's not. And it gets cloudy when some local affiliates choose to use the state name. So in Iowa, where I'm from, you might call it the Hawkeye Chess Association. Well, that's the Iowa Hawkeyes, so that could be confusing. Another situation might be a college or university, and if you were to name yourself, name your college affiliate, and it sounded too much like the state chapter, we would help advise, and the policy would recommend phrasing to be able to still reflect your university, or at the same time not conflict with interfering with the state chapter. Some local affiliates have called themselves the Federation, and confusing whether or not they are the state chapter affiliate, and so forth. So thanks, Caleb. I got those mixed up.
Jim, we have Mike Hoffpower has his hand up.
Okay, Mike, can we let Mike speak?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. So in the policy, whose responsibility is it to adjudicate the issue?
So it's our understanding that the U.S. office would do that upon receipt of an application or a renewal of the affiliate. And
Okay.
that was not resolved through the staff, it would be then referred to SAC. Any other committee members? I don't have the policy in front of me, but that's my understanding.
Yeah, I don't think we explicitly mentioned how any disputes be resolved in the policy, but I recall that's what the committee's understanding was, and I think that's the common sense way of dealing with it.
Do you have any other suggestions, Mike, on how?
Yeah, I would suggest that you should have in writing how, because otherwise you really don't have a policy.
Okay.
Because the policy should state, who's responsible, who has what responsibilities, and I think what you outlined is the right way to go. Because ultimately, if the SAC could make a recommendation to the executive board, and the executive board could eventually rule on it if that was required. But policies in general are enforced by the office, and when the office, perceives that there's pushback, then it would go, it would get referred to the committee, like you stated.
Okay. So it would be helpful to add a bullet or two about the enforcement and appeals process on that.
So yeah, because it just clarifies matters. Yep. That's just what policy.
Thank you.
For. So you have
Thank you, Mike. That's a very good suggestion, and we appreciate your feedback on that. And Steve, if you could please note that in the minutes as an action. Thank you. We had several case reviews this year. Most of them, several of them, though, are still open and we've not resolved, so we won't call those out by name. But we've had 4 that we've ruled upon, and those are referenced in our state and affiliate state and affiliate committee report, which is posted on the U.S. Chess website, along with the other information for the delegates meeting. I think all committee reports are posted, and they were posted so back in April. And so you're able to go out there and you can read about them. We're not going to comment on open cases or identify the parties that were involved with that case until we reach a final decision, and that decision is approved by the executive board and if necessary, delegates. So that I'll be honest, at the beginning of our I'll say fiscal year from August through July, it was not very busy we did not have very many complaints, but it's only been in these last, say, 3 to 4 months that the cases have really ramped up and all of a sudden sidetracked us from a lot of our other work that we wanted to do. But so that's where they don't come evenly and spaced out, but and when they come in batches, it pretty much takes up everybody's time. And then we have been following up on state chapter survey with 2 groups, a state chapter training work group and a tournament coordination work group. So here's our response to the delegate motion. It's titled or numbered DM 2415. And during the 2024 delegates meeting, if those recall, we had quite a debate about the DC state chapter. And from that, there was this delegate motion. And I also know Rhode Island was also under review and consideration debate. I wasn't at the meeting. I'm not sure how much more or less that contributed to this motion as well. But from that, this motion specifically stated when an existing state chapter status is challenged, that state may only be re-challenged for 3 years upon recommendation of the delegates. So we basically, I think the intent was that we didn't want to have the same debate on the same state chapter and applicant for state chapter year after year after year. And then instead of having a vote at that time, it was referred to bylaws and states, SAC, to establish procedures. And so we have written something to respond to that.
And Jim, just let me jump in real quick, just to let you know the poll that you asked me to insert into the presentation is live now. So,
all right. So we have a basic question. It's because there's kind of 2 ways to go at this. One, let's follow through and complete something that responds to defining when and when not a challenge is appropriate. And another one that says, no, we should hear them on a case-by-case basis and determine going from there. So the committee thought it would be good to take the opportunity to hear from those on this call as to how they respond, how they feel about this motion in quotes. And so we've asked Jock to go ahead and put together a poll to ask you for that feedback. And if I'm correct, it is an anonymous poll, correct?
Yes, that's correct. I made it to
That's correct. So we won't know who said what. We'll just see the aggregated numbers. So if you could go ahead and make that poll live, we'll pause for a minute to let people read this part and to be able to review and cast a ballot. And there is a undecided, favor, or what was the
it's support limits to state chapter status. The second option is do not support limits to state chapter status. The third option being undecided. About 19 of the 27 participants have already answered. A few more now are starting to come in, but okay. It appears that it's already getting some traction and some responses.
Okay. And when you think that we've got all responses, please let us know, and then let us know.
There's a question in the chat about what is meant by status of the chapter.
A challenge to the status of the chapter.
Yeah.
Is what it means. Can we re-challenge the existing state chapter status?
Or more specifically, I think what we're trying to ask about is, if you've already challenged it and you lost, should you be able to re-challenge them in the following year, for example, which is what the original proposal was about.
I know. Let
Right.
me I'll speak for, and Vish can chime in if he wishes, but the executive board's intent when we first discussed this last year before the delegates meeting was kind of what Jim Houdina said, to stop these repetitive challenges just because. The executive board certainly was not going to say, oh, well, you challenged last year, so you can't challenge again. That was never the intent. Because if the challenge was justified and had good rationale for it, then there would be no reason to not have the challenge. But we were seeing that the same challenge was coming forward again, definitely in one of the two cases that we heard last year. It was the same information all over again, just being recast.
Okay. That's exactly the way we understood it to be as well, Mike. And in fact, I think some of the language that you just shared with us is indeed in our draft response, in accordance with what we were asked to do. So let me turn it to that, and I'm going to turn it over to Caleb.
All right. Okay. So the original motion.
Did I get it wrong? Did I miss your slide?
No, you're good. We can
Right.
stick on this.
Okay, you want me to go to the next page, slide then, Caleb?
In just a moment.
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to first. So the motion that the executive board brought was specifically about these repetitive challenges, but I do want to emphasize the delegates referred to us to create procedures for a state chapter challenge in general, and this probably happened because, as was probably apparent from last year and the year before that, there are very few rules just dictating how a challenge is supposed to work. There's pretty much just a deadline, and it's just going to get voted on at the annual meeting, and that's about it. So we kind of drafted a state chapter challenge policy, state chapter status policy that would kind of explain the process from beginning to end. And if you want to move to the next slide.
Oh, excuse me. Hang on. Sorry, didn't mean to do that.
It's all right.
There we go. All right, there you go, Caleb.
All right, so since we're covering state chapter challenges and there's lots of similarities between that and vacancies, the policy also addresses state chapter vacancies like what happened with DC. It includes things like the responses, committee reviews, as well as the procedures for considering it on the delegates floor. It also provides some helpful guidance for what to include in credentials. And what we have in the policy is pretty close to what was done in practice in 2023 and 2024 for DC and Rhode Island, even though we didn't have much roles for that. And we did pretty much include the executive board's proposal about repetitive challenges. The wording is slightly different, but it's essentially the same thing. But the policy as a whole is a lot broader than just what it originally was with the repetitive challenges. So that's about it. I think we'd provide a lot of helpful clarity, not only for the delegates, but also applicants and SAC, the office, EB, and probably other people. So that's all I have.
And Caleb, the full document is available with the delegates package, right?
Yeah. Yes. Pages 3 and 4 of the delegates call.
Okay.
Yeah. So it kind of explains pretty much just about anything you might need to know about the process, because Robert's Rules of Order doesn't have any rules specifically about dealing with state chapter applications. It just doesn't cover it. So we have clearly close to no rules at all about it, besides a few things in the bylaws. So this would fix that problem.
So what we wrote is 2 pages. Do people have questions seek clarification on something that was written? Do you want to take a minute to look at it? Just some general comments there, or I don't want to rush through this.
Terry has his hand. He's ready to say something.
Oh,
Can someone?
can I speak now or?
Yes.
Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, is this policy, I just seen it in the delegates call, intended to be a substitute motion for the original wording in bold submitted by the executive board?
Yes, that is our intent.
Right.
It would not go in the bylaws. It would just be a policy added to the DASIs.
So there'd be some word saying, this following policy is adopted.
Yes, I expect either me or someone else on the committee will present a motion to amend that way.
Okay, thank you.
Now I'm not trying to weigh in one way or the other, but the bylaws committee has a different recommendation. So I am sure there will be some discussion about the two. I don't want to comment on the delegates' recommendation. It's their recommendation, and anything I might say could be incorrect or not reflective of their true intent. So I'm purposely not avoiding it, but I don't want to comment on something that I had no part in preparing. Anything else on this? Okay, hearing none. Let's move on then. So Caleb gets to keep talking. So we had two work groups. One was the state affiliate training work group, and then the other one is the tournament clearinghouse work group. Caleb led the work group on the state affiliate training, and I led the work group on the tournament clearinghouse. So go ahead, Caleb, and then when we're done with this, we'll slide over and talk about tournament clearinghouse.
All right. So this work group kind of came out of SAC did send out a survey last year about the DASIs, and then we also had the workshop last year, and both of them kind of showed there was a need to focus on state affiliate training. So that's how this work group came about. After a few meetings, it became apparent that we need more data to understand exactly what the challenges with, maybe I shouldn't use challenges since we just talked about that, but what the issues with state chapter training is. So we did that, and that provided some helpful data. One thing that we found some of the biggest needs that state chapters had was like volunteer recruitment, insurance and risk management, clearinghouses, fundraising, and some other things. And then we also found that the majority of state chapters are interested in quarterly meetings of their state chapter presidents, as well as there's a substantial interest in possibly creating a group in USS forums for state chapter officers and creating a mentorship program. And if we can go to the next slide. And then while some of these ideas that were mentioned in the survey, maybe some things we'll get to later, we thought that the best thing to start off with, and probably the easiest to start with, would be creating quarterly meetings with state chapter officers. So these would potentially be on Zoom. It would be sort of like the workshop in, I guess, from a technical perspective, but we mainly an educational focus. So, for example, our first one we were thinking would focus on volunteer recruitment, and we would invite one or two guest speakers to talk about how do you recruit and retain your board members and committee members, and then someone else to talk about how you recruit and retain tournament directors. And then we would have lots of time for questions at the end. And then we would record the meetings, and then we might use the meetings as kind of a starting place to create best practice documents as well. So it would be there live, but there would also be permanent training materials available from each one of them. It would just continue to multiply over the years. So I don't know if there are any questions about any of that. Any
What
thoughts
training,
about it?
what training is going to be available for that gets into the details and best practices, to use your words, which are good, with regard to the DASI?
Yeah, that's a possibility, something we could possibly do for a quarterly meeting. That wasn't exactly something that came out in our survey as something a lot of state chapters were concerned about, but it's something we might do. I know we've also talked about lately with some issues with invitationals. We might, do one invitationals at some point for like, the Denker, Barber, et cetera. What's best practice of that? So we shall see what gets covered, but that's something we might talk about one of these days.
Because I know at the executive board, one of the central issues that we see is the complaints process. And we see a lot of complaints that had absolutely no involvement whatsoever of the state chapter. And what I mean is it's something happens at the local school tournament, and next thing you know, it's at the executive board. And if we ask the state chapter about it, they're like, we didn't even know. Nobody told us about it, And we have seen some state chapters that have interjected themselves in the process, and it's been fruitful. So I think some best practices about complaints should also be discussed. And the intent is not, to have the state chapter do the ruling first before it comes to US Chess. That's not the idea. But also the idea is to give the state chapter a chance to do what's part of its job, which is to look out for the interests of chess members across the state. And if there are problems occurring down in the trenches in local tournaments, and the state chapter has no awareness of what those issues are, then they can't try to put their own corrective actions in place and help the local tournament directors. Because right now they just, when I say local, I don't mean local as a status of a TD. I mean a local person doing a tournament in a school or a small town or a club or whatever. Those matters are going, they're coming straight to US Chess. And I think there may be ways to handle those things, because the state chapters in general have people that are pretty experienced and pretty savvy, and at a minimum know where to reach out for help if they need it. So
Mike, if I could ask, if we wouldn't have state chapters first reviewing the complaint, how would you recommend?
No, that's not what I'm saying.
I know you're saying not to do that.
Yeah.
Well, how should they be included?
Well, because it's pretty clear on the executive board when we get a case that says, well, I wonder what the state chapter has to say about that. And we've had several of those, and we've gone to the state chapters and asked them when we see those. And so I think, that process occurring and being understood by the state chapters that it's going to occur from time to time is a good thing to know about.
Okay.
Because otherwise the state chapters, something happens in their state to an affiliate and they had absolutely no knowledge, and never had a chance to try to help the affiliate. And all of a sudden, the hammer's coming down from Grandpa US Chess saying, you lost your affiliate status, or now you're suspended for 5 years or something like that. And there was no awareness on the part of the state chapter. And we have seen cases where the state chapter is very aware of what was going on. It was helpful in the process.
The idea in general is to help the especially less experienced new board members get up to speed to the point where they are involved in that sort of thing, where they do have better contact with the state in general. And, if you got a new president or whatever, and the old president isn't helping them out, they need to have a place to go to give them a better idea. Well, what do I need to be doing? What is my job really? what all does need to happen as far as the state affiliate is concerned with the state in general.
Yeah, and Leela DeCan, I have for several years done, one-on-one sessions with state boards, with different state boards, and talking to them about, things like fiduciary responsibility, confidentiality, those kinds of topics that are important to board members of state chapters to understand. And, I'm more than happy to share that type of a product with the States and Affiliates Committee. So, you can adopt it and, even ask somebody like Leela or myself, who's got a lot of board experience, to give those kind of presentations when it's necessary to a group of state chapters.
Right. And just
That might be an idea for a future quarterly meeting. So
just to let everybody on the call who may not be aware, what happens is a complaint goes in to US Just, goes to the executive board. The executive board reviews it. And Mike, you could explain if you do anything or what you might do.
Yeah,
but ultimately,
the main thing we look for is we don't look to see whether or not the case has merit. That's not what the executive board does. We look to see to what committee it should be properly, or committees it should be properly referred to. Because
Right.
we don't, most complaints come in and will be, 5 or more pages long. All we do is read the complaint. We don't get into, that statement from this person really doesn't support the charge. That's not our job. We're just to help route the complaint to the proper committee or committees.
okay.
And
then from there,
then we stay out of it until the committee provides its recommendation, back to the executive board.
and from there, when we receive it as SAC, we review, determine whether we can accept jurisdiction, if it's within our charter,
Right.
And so forth. If we do, then US Just Office forwards that complaint to the person that is identified in the complaint,
Yeah,
to respond. Say, here's the complaint, please respond. And then when that response comes in, the person who lodged the complaint or party that lodged the complaint can then prepare a rebuttal, and then SAC will deliberate. And along that process, if we feel we need any further clarification, the complaint itself is not well understood by the committee, or the rebuttal is not, we will go in and ask for that clarification before we then deliberate and prepare a response that then goes back to the executive board, and then you can accept that response also if you so choose.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, because that's the executive board takes into account the response. And in essence, the appeals process that's outlined in the bylaws allows appeals when membership status is being revoked or suspended. So for example, if States and Affiliates Committee decides to suspend the status of an affiliate, recommends to the executive board to suspend the status of an affiliate or to revoke that affiliate status, that affiliate will be permitted a 30-day to submit an appeal to the executive board to appeal the procedure, as opposed to, let's say, the States and Affiliates Committee ruled to sanction, with a letter of reprimand or a warning, a formal warning, that that state chapter, that state level affiliate, that's not appealable. So if the executive board said, yes, we concur with that finding, it's not appealable because it's not affecting the player. It's not affecting the membership status.
Okay. So I think the last couple slides here are about the tournament clearinghouse, and we made some progress, and then we really wanted to stop and get everybody's feedback on this, because it's really a difficult situation to manage. First of all, last year and in our surveys, there were a large number of participants that expressed concerns about the functionality of the tournament coordinator or clearinghouse coordinator. And they gave some of these examples that they would like to see. They'd like us to provide education materials. A lot of people just continue to ask, well, what is the role of the clearinghouse coordinator? What should they do? Some states do this really well. Mike Hoffpower here has taken the bull by the horns and really worked in a regional environment, and others struggle with it and don't know where decisions lie when somebody submits something to the clearinghouse and who gets priority. This is particularly the case where we have two affiliates in the same city or a large metropolitan area. We certainly saw that with the DC chapter affiliate last year, but other large metropolitan areas likely have similar concerns. Chicago, I'm familiar with Minneapolis. I know New England has been working really hard to try to coordinate their efforts, but everybody's kind of doing it on their own. New organizers who come into the U.S. Chess Association as a local affiliate can sometimes create more conflicts than those that have kind of been around for a while.
To that end, the executive board has discussed the need to perhaps have a certification for organizers, in that unless you're already a certified tournament director or you are, quote, a certified organizer, you will not be permitted to submit a tournament report or submit a TLA.
Just like a tournament director couldn't submit unless they're certified.
Yeah, and because just like you point out, I mean, we see problems where organizers who put together events and are not certified tournament directors really cause more issues because they don't know what they're doing. And naming their event and stepping on someone else's toes is just one of those areas where the SAC has been, involved to try to help figure out solutions, and we appreciate it.
And another layer that we weren't fully considering probably out of the gate was FIDE and FIDE rated events, because while people had expressed concerns about someone dropping a norm event on top of their state open tournament or a national, say, amateur tournament, even if we took an action against somebody at the U.S. chess level, what would the impact be, and what could we not do if it was a FIDE rated event, because they have their own procedures and norms and so forth. So all of that kind of piled up, and we have half of SAC on one work group and half of SAC on the other work group. Our half, we prepared a flow chart, and it's nothing revolutionary. The flow chart looks very similar, and I bet most people who've ran a tournament would recognize exactly every step in that. But what we really feel needs to be the backbone of any process, and this is where we want feedback, is compliance. What if you don't submit to the clearinghouse? What if you submit to the clearinghouse, they give you a recommendation to do something different, and you do it the way you wanted to anyway? How do we hold people accountable? How do we, like Mike said, if you had a certification, maybe that can be online. But if in the current environment, you don't have an organizer certification, what would be some of the ways that we could enforce the use of a clearinghouse and following the clearinghouse coordinators and state's role? So first thing was like, go ahead.
Part of the central issue here is that in the bylaws or DASIs, nowhere in any U.S. chess documentation is there something that empowers a clearinghouse to have the kinds of authority that are being laid out here.
Right.
So because that there isn't anything that empowers the clearinghouse, and I'm not saying that there should be. I'm just saying if you want to do what you've got here, it's a prerequisite. you have to have an authorization document that gives, or policy or ADM or DASI or something that gives the authority to the state chapter that oversees the clearinghouse in order to enact certain actions. Because without that, you know, the organizers say, well, who are you to say that? I don't care. There's nothing that says you have that authority, you know?
Fair. What our recommendation was being here is not to say this is a nationwide process that everybody must follow. We are working on what we're calling a model clearinghouse process or procedure that states can choose to adopt. We quickly heard that some states really like the way their tournament coordination is going. Florida, Texas, they're quite satisfied. Tennessee, maybe. They don't want someone to come in and all of a sudden say, nope, that I don't care if that worked. You got to do it our way now. That's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to put together a model policy that states, if they so choose, can adopt through motion or bylaws amendment or whatever. And with that, then comes their authority to enforce what the clearinghouse process determines as appropriate. And so some of the compliance enforcement measures that we got feedback on and vetted and talked to the executive board about were these 7 items here. So suspension of future rated tournaments. So if you're an affiliate, you just decide you're going to run a tournament in the same place on the same date as the state championship and ignore everything from the clearinghouse. Well, you no longer get to rate future tournaments. And that could go back to an organizational certification that Mike, that you suggest, which I think is a great idea. You could fine the affiliate. You could revoke the affiliate. You could refer the affiliate's actions to the ethics committee. You cannot advertise future events or TLAs or email blasts through US Chess or the state chapter's website. A couple things we considered but did not get good feedback on already were, saying if you didn't get a check mark that's saying this was approved, your rating fees would be doubled or tripled or whatever. Or simply not allowing the event to be rated. But we thought, especially the last one, the feedback we got was that would do as much harm to the people who played in the tournament as it would be to the affiliate who hosted the tournament. So I would like to just open it up to feedback about these ideas. And if other people have good ideas about other ways to ensure compliance with a tournament clearinghouse, what those might be. And I'm going to stop sharing this slide here because I want to be able to engage everybody.
One of the things I think, I don't know if I brought this up at the last SAC meeting, but the thought of and I'm just throwing this out there, but as a DM potential, what would be the thought of having each official state affiliate have the US Chess website on their local website?
Well,
and some do or don't? Would that help?
If I may, Maureen,
Yeah,
I would like to let the people who are not on SAC
Oh.
have an opportunity to speak since they are our guests here and we're asking for their input. We can certainly deliberate everything as a committee at our next meeting next month.
Well,
So-
that's why I'm throwing that out there for others to
Okay.
look to hear.
That's absolutely appropriate.
But
Who's feeling any pain? Who's feeling any pain in their local tournament coordination in their state, within their state? Is it all just reeling going forward? Okay, so here's a good comment. to me, this feels punitive towards affiliates. I agree. So how would we have what in our discussions have said is a proactive or reinforcing practice that would draw affiliates to follow the process properly?
It's a hard nut. It's a really hard nut to crack because when the clearinghouse was first designed, its intent was that it is an additional it's an additional information outlet because many small tournaments never make it into TLAs. And so it was an additional information site for people to look at the state chapter website and to see what tournaments are occurring in their local areas, because not every tournament is required to have a TLA, and I don't think every tournament should be required to have a TLA because you have tournaments that are not even rated that are good to advertise, or just a chess gathering is going to be held in some park this weekend. Come play. Those are great things to put on the clearinghouse sites.
Okay. So one comment said, why not consider rewards for affiliates that comply, like bigger ads or free ads in state magazine? I think another good piece of feedback was about New Mexico and that their opinion that affiliates are free to run their own tournaments. That's great. Then you would not need to adopt a policy. We're being asked for some guidance, some rigor in certain states to be able to help them be more formal in how they set up their events, especially smaller states where it's not hard to just go down the street to another tournament. So in response to that, I would basically say if New Mexico didn't feel that they needed an enforcement mechanism or tool, then they don't need to adopt it.
The issue, though, is that things are going good right now. What about 3 years from now, 10 years from now? So the policy needs to, or the process needs to better account for change, because change can be not so good in some cases. Because we do see instances where there's adversarial relationships between affiliates, organizers with one another. And, I'm going to name my event the Blue Ridge Open because that's, we live on the Blue Ridge. I don't care that you've used the name for the last 10 years. We're naming it the Blue Ridge Open because we live there and you don't, so those kind of relationships, are going to pop up.
Mike and others, Paul Covington from Oklahoma. The only way I see that you could really make this work long term is that U.S. Chess would be the mothership. The state affiliates, the state chapters would report directly to the U.S. Chess. The affiliates within the state would report through their state chapters. And by doing so, you have a model that can be working. But that only works in states where people are actually doing their jobs regularly and not just haphazardly. So I proposed this one time many years ago, but bottom line is that the state affiliates have basically most all the powers except for naming championship tournaments that the state chapters do presently. But comments?
So we talked in our committee, in our work group, a bit about, this magical database that could function as a place to register events, and then the states go in and approve it by checking the box, and then it would be released and go up online or whatever like that. My concern specifically is that that is a huge undertaking requiring resources that I don't know if we have in US Chess. So I'm trying to guide our work group for an immediate approach to something that doesn't require a huge investment for infrastructure. And then maybe, Paul, your very good suggestion could be then built on as a long-term plan. But, you know, we all agonize a bit over the US Chess website as it is, and trying to build it into something even bigger. I'm skeptical as to whether or when that would be able to be implemented.
Well, what if they had the ability to have the state affiliates do the heavy lifting, in that we had discussed about awards on those who did not or who did play it safely and was able to coordinate within their state with the state approval. Then if that state then gets rewarded so many points, then that state gets discounted, say perhaps a membership potentially, just to give some kind of incentive so that they start working together within their own state. That way, the federation then doesn't have to monitor 52 state affiliates. Just a thought.
Yeah.
Some states don't have that kind of resources. I mean, if a state has those resources, yeah, that would work. Some states don't, they have maybe 20 tournaments all year long. Some states have 400 tournaments all year long. So there can be a big difference there. And then how does a particular clearinghouse decide whether two tournaments are in conflict with each other? Yes, you have the state championships that everyone's supposed to stay away from. But what if we have two tournaments that are just a few blocks away from each other, and they're both, have the same class prizes, everything. They're both trying to attract, kids that are under 1,000, and they're just a few blocks from each other on the same day, at the same time.
But that's where you would monitor that. That be a self-monitor then, if that's
yeah, it's a combination. I mean, because Tom and I do this because we love chess and we love to make sure people have information. But
So
I don't know that Jones School is two blocks away from Smith School
those two
in certain cities.
Okay, for starters. And we also I had some criteria and I didn't get them on the slide, and I apologize for not being able to pull it up. But some things that we were adamant about were, just because you're first into the clearinghouse doesn't mean you get the date. If you put in something that said in 10 years from now I want to run a tournament on the same date as the state championship, no, that doesn't mean you get the date for your tournament. Certain regional events or national tournaments that might be located in your area. And then whether or not there is a senior-only tournament or a youth-only tournament. Yeah, Tom, you certainly come up with the example of if they're identical at the same time in the same location. Obviously, you're coming up with the hardest thing to try to figure out. And maybe it gets kicked to the state chapter board and they vote.
Yeah, Jim, we also talked, I believe, about longevity of the event. So if someone's been holding an event on a certain weekend,
I don't know, unless if you're saying that there are.
Yeah, there's certain events that most of us probably have our state open championship on Labor Day weekend.
Yep.
That's a longevity thing there as well. In Northern California, Sacramento has July 4th. That's their weekend when they have a tournament up there. Everyone tries to stay away from them and not have a competing one with them. We try and coordinate between the different major affiliates we have here, Mechanics, Berkeley Chess, Bay Area Chess, but there are just, there's a wealth of players here in Northern California, in the Bay Area, and there's also a wealth of affiliates, and there are literally 4 or 5 tournaments every single weekend in the Bay Area, not more than 25 miles away from each other.
And are those organizers cooperating, or are they antagonistic?
Oh, hell no. Oh, hell no. Why do you think it's, you see all this gray hair? At least I still have some. Don, how come blah, blah, blah is having a tournament the same weekend
Right.
we are?
Right.
What are you
Right.
going to do about it? You're the clearinghouse. Do something. I'm like,
So do you have anything that's worked that you would recommend to others?
you just, I try and talk with the affiliates and say, okay, let's try and get this worked out. Someone mentioned something about the longevity and pre-reserving. We said, okay, you do that first thing in, and someone just decides to come in and say, okay, I'm going to reserve my tournaments for the next 6 months. Boom, I'm the first one in. Neener. And that didn't work well. Well, my tournament's going to be bigger. Yeah, there's another one. Well, I'm planning on bringing in 80 people, and Bob over there, he's probably just going to get 50. And they try to say, well, the 51 should go away. We had 2 years ago 2 tournaments, major tournaments. 5 $10,000 prize funds on Memorial Day weekend. There were not more than 30 miles from each other. And I tried to get the 2 of them to cooperate, and they're going, oh, hell no.
Did either tournament or suffer from the other one?
They both did. One of the organizations is no longer in existence anymore. Well, they're one of the organizers was 1000 GM. So if anyone is familiar with them, you know what their current status is. But yeah, there are some states where if you're, let's say, Alaska or Wyoming and you're the clearinghouse, you've got an easy job. If you're in Northern California, even Texas, at least Texas is big. It's, large areas. So they've got their different, regions and everything. They keep themselves apart. In Northern California, 90% of it is in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I imagine in Los Angeles, most of it is in the Los Angeles area. So I pity the fool that has to be the clearinghouse of those states.
Okay. So thank you very much, Tom. That's good input. I think I'm, in the interest of time and where we're at in our process here on our agenda, we've reached the end of the agenda, but what I would like to do is just tee it up and say, hey, everybody, we are going to need more input. And when you see that call for input, you can just think back to this very discussion. We all have war stories, but I don't hear a lot of best practices out of what to do. I like Mike's suggestion of an organizer certification. I'm not sure where that would lead, but at least it's an effort to try to make things work better. So we're at 8:30 and we started a little late, so I let this go a little late, but we really do need to wrap up. I see some comments in the chat that ask how much longer this is going to go on, which is a hint. We're ready to wrap up.
But Jim, if you'd like me to read off the poll results, I can do so.
Yeah, would you please, John?
Paul Covington's trying to say something again also.
I'll wait until after the poll results.
Okay.
Okay.
We had 85% of the attendees participating. To the first response, which was support limits to state chapter status. That was the largest response. That was supported at 57%. The do not support limit to state chapter status only received 9%, and undecided was 35%.
Thank you. So there should be some good discussion at the delegates meeting about this. So those undecided, or even if you voted in favor or against, you'll have certainly opportunity to weigh in and get some more opinions, and maybe that will reshape or solidify your thoughts on the matter.